It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Today we have a person who actually experienced a massive heart attack, and we'll be talking to him very shortly. But my guests are James Bognet, who is the owner of Bognet Inc., a construction contracting firm here in Hazleton, and Dr. Gerald Coleman, who is up at the emergency room here at Lehigh Valley Hospital in Hazleton. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Grew up in northern Jersey, went to Muhlenberg College. Prior to that, I worked as a trauma tech at Hackensack University Medical Center. I did that for 3 years. I did a lot of EMS time. That's kind of where my career started. So I went to Muhlenberg College. I graduated there with a BS in biology, and probably the most important thing out of that was I met my wife there. And then I went to University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is up in Maine. Got to live in that part of the country for 2 years. And I came down, I did all my training, my internship, residency, and fellowship down in Lehigh Valley Health Network.
Terrific. And enjoying being up here in Hazleton? Mm-hmm.
The drive during the winter, not so much.
Yeah, but it's a great hospital. Jim,
agreed.
How long you been in the business?
Well, we've been in business 48 years. I'm working, was my brother's business, and then I took it over. I own it now for the last 15 years. Yeah. I've been working at it forever.
Yeah, you guys do great work, have a great reputation too. That's and you earned that, I'm sure. So tell me, I understand you experienced something that we don't like to experience, but you experienced a massive heart attack, okay? Tell me what happened.
Well, it was a typical Saturday on July 29th, which I've been doing for the last 25 or 30 years. I woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, had a cup of coffee, read through the paper quick, stopped at my office, which is a half a mile from the house, for 25, 30 minutes, and I was up at my vegetable garden on Harrison Street, which was the family homestead, and I bought it, and I raised all the vegetables that my father did. Worked 4 or 5 hours there, went home, washed the car, did some work around the house, went in, took a shower, and sat down, to rest for a while before I went to church. And everything started going bad. I really didn't have any pain that I thought anyway, but after my wife questioned me, thank God, and I said, well, there's a little burning here, but really nothing. I thought I had a virus, because one of the guys at work had a virus all week, a stomach virus. And then all of a sudden things started going bad. She called 911 pretty quickly.
So you were experiencing burning pain?
Just a little, yeah, across the chest. Nothing that was going to knock me over, but I didn't have enough strength to get out of the chair and get to the bathroom. So that kind of told me that something was really going wrong. I didn't know what it was. But she called 911, and they were there in no time. And 7 or 8 minutes later, I was in the hospital, and Dr. Coleman was doing his thing. Thank God.
So it was just to happen like that. Did you have any things prior to that, maybe a couple days or a week that you
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I was working that morning like I normally do, washing the car, reaching, no problem at all. But then all of a sudden, 1:30, 2 o'clock, it just hit.
Now, how old were you when this happened?
I'm 69 years old.
God bless you. You look great. Yeah. Is that what happened when you were 69 when you had the heart attack?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you called 911, but prior to that, you had no symptoms?
No real, which, I never had one before, so I didn't know really what the signs were. I just felt a little burning sensation in the chest. Nothing that was going to knock me over, but when I could not get up and get to the restroom, and I should have, because I started vomiting all over myself.
Oh, okay. So then,
yeah.
All right. So okay. He calls 911. Okay. They pick him up. Now, what do you do to what happens when he's in the hospital? He gets there.
Well, actually, there's a good backstory to before Mr. Bognet even arrived. EMS called me and said, we're inbound with this 69-year-old gentleman having a heart attack, from what they can tell on the EKG, which is the heart machine that they hook you up to. And I said, well, one problem is that our helicopter that is at Lehigh Valley Health Network Hazleton campus was out on a mission. So the closest cath center, where if he needed to go and get a cardiac catheterization, is up in Wilkes-Barre, a good 25 minutes away. And I think the one part of the puzzle, and there's many different parts of the puzzle that are kind of made this story so remarkable is that the paramedic says, no, Dr. Coleman, and we were on a first name basis, he goes, Jerry, he needs to come to you. He's too sick. I think if he goes up there, he won't survive. Because they're my eyes and ears in the field. I take what they say for pretty much verbatim. And I said, okay, we realize we're going to need to get him out of here as soon as possible. So when I hang up the phone with the paramedic, I could hear him saying, Jimmy, stay with me. And it sounds like he was going in and out of consciousness. Wow. I immediately got on the phone with the Lehigh Valley Transfer Center and said, I need a helicopter up here now. I said, I don't have one. Try to figure out where we're going to go with that. So when Mr. Bognet arrived, he was very sweaty. He had vomit out of the right side of his mouth. It was all over his shirt. And he was very pale and gray appearing. Looked very weak. Could talk in maybe 1 to 2 word sentences. And as soon as we saw that, it was kind of like all hands on deck. Pretty much everything else in the emergency department stopped. All my nurses went to work assessing Mr. Bognet. And that's one thing I want to say is the other piece of the puzzle is I worked in multiple emergency departments, at least 7. I've rotated through about 4 or 5 as a student and resident. And I wouldn't trade the nurses in this, quote, small hospital for anything in the world. I mean, they're an amazing group of men and women. So he got there, it looked like he was having a heart attack based on the EKG monitoring rhythm that we had. And then he kind of clutched his chest, and I looked at him, and it's very rare when you look in someone's eyes and then they die in front of you. He went into an arrhythmia called ventricular fibrillation. So think about it as a bag of worms kind of just quivering. So his top part of the heart and the bottom part of the heart are not communicating. If you don't address this arrhythmia or abnormal heart rhythm, immediately it's universally fatal. So we had him hooked up to our machine. We shocked him. He wakes up and he says, I'm back. And we're like, okay, well, this is a good sign. He's talking to us. I know that I have to really move on this and get him down there to Lehigh Valley Cedar Crest for a cardiac catheterization. I placed a phone call to the transfer center, and they said, well, we can get him down there, but we have to find you a helicopter. That's when things really took a turn for the worst. My nurses called me back into the room and says, I could hear them, they were starting to do compressions, and that he lost a heartbeat. Now he's got no heartbeat, no blood pressure, and he's completely unconscious, and we had to do CPR for him for about 20 minutes. We shocked him 4 times, and eventually we got a pulse back. At that point, he was not breathing, so I had to insert a tube to breathe for him. And eventually we were able to get a helicopter there, and I gave report, and I had to go, and they were kind of getting him packaged up. And it was my first interaction talking to his wife. And that's probably the hardest part of my job, because I said, look, you know, your husband technically died. And it was like, she was almost going to have to collapse on the floor. And I said, no, but he's got a pulse back. I think he's going to potentially be okay. So we packaged him up. We got him out where he needed to be, and he went down to Lehigh Valley Cedar Crest for further care.
Jim, do you recall any of this?
I recall, like you said, I woke up and I said, I'm back, or I'm here, or something like that. And there were a lot of lights like there are here. Yeah. And I don't remember much.
But this is a more pleasant situation.
Yeah, I don't remember too much after that, but he is right. And I forgot to mention that the gentleman from the apps, the ambulance crew, they were phenomenal. I argued with the man a little bit that I wasn't having a heart attack, and then I said, I better give up because he knows what he's talking about. He did the EKG immediately when he came into my family room. He said, you're having a heart attack, and I told him he was wrong, but then I realized things were going bad.
Do you recall the flight down to?
No, I don't recall anything. All I recall is telling him that I don't do helicopters, but he said, you're doing this one. I was completely out, right, doctor?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is, we had the people from the helicopter who fly the helicopter. It's actually an emergency word on the helicopter. They have all of the facilities and technical things there, right? And so they're maintaining him as they're flying down, or what happens when they're flying down?
So what they were doing is Mr. Bognet had the bottom portion of his heart, the inferior portion, was having a heart attack. And one of the problems with that is you can have a very, very low heart rate. So they had to basically pace his heart, or if it did, it would stop again. They gave him medications so he wouldn't go into that abnormal heart rhythm. And basically they just load it and go, and this is not a situation to stay and play. They got him down there. It's about a 17-minute flight, versus if we went by ground, it would be upwards of an hour by ground. So they just monitor him, and if anything happens in flight, they can do exactly what I did in the emergency department.
Yes.
So it's an emergency department in the air.
You know, it's interesting, Jerry. We have been talking since I started the show in 1994 about the health care we have here in Hazleton. And, you know, at first it was, you know, difficult because people still think they have to go out of town or whatever. And I could appreciate that. Now, there's certain things where you have to go out of town. But, you know, we have a hospital here, an emergency room. Jim, I guess you could attest to it. Okay. Well, let me ask you, what do you think about
They were great.
Yeah.
And I actually went back up there 2 weeks later to thank them.
Yeah.
And I never saw so many people. My son was with me. Everybody was so emotional. My son almost started crying. He couldn't believe it, how emotional the whole staff was. They were all so glad to see me. And I was glad to see them, even though I didn't remember any of them.
Yeah.
And the gentleman, he said, the one young guy did the CPR, he said, for 20 or more than 20 minutes. To keep the blood moving.
I mean, that kind of brings up the point when you have someone that you were talking to and literally dies in front of you, you have that connection with them. And it's almost like they become part of your bigger family. And you're saying, they're constantly, hey, Jerry, did you hear anything? What's going on, Mr. Bogdan? We were constantly getting updates. And then we found out he was discharged. Everyone's like, great. And then when he came up, it was like, this is why we do what we do every day, because, you know, it's a tough job. Everyone has a tough job, but it's when you see him come back and say, thank you. To give someone their second birthday is a really rewarding portion of our job.
You know, Jerry, I could never in a million years do what you do and any of those doctors and nurses, because, like you said, you could be looking at someone and you try your best and you lose them, right. And then you have success stories like Jim here. And I've said this many times about the doctors and nurses and the assistants and everybody who works at the hospital. They give them the best. And sometimes someone has a bad day, they have some stress, etc. And you know, it's always, you know, you got to look at the total picture. And we've been very blessed. Yeah. So Jim, those 4 o'clock masses help out, don't they?
Yeah.
They help out, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, folks, I'm talking to Jim Bognet. Now, Jim had the pleasure of teaching his brother, was now a physician. He is the owner of Bognet, a construction contracting firm here. You said 46 years?
48 years.
48 years, God bless you. And Dr. Gerald Coleman, who is an emergency physician up at the emergency department in Hazleton. If you want to get any information, you can go to our website, lvhn.org. And folks, I highly recommend you download our app, which is SSP TV, and you can watch all of these shows. I know there's sometimes people have come on the show and they have relatives either in Philadelphia or whatever. Now you can just hit the app and you'll see all of our shows. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. We're talking to Dr. Coleman and James Bognet, who is the owner of Bognet, Inc., a construction contracting firm here in Hazleton for 48 years, right, Jim? You said 48 years. Jim experienced a heart attack. Got up Saturday morning at 5 o'clock, did his routine, and by 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, was it around that time that we start experiencing the
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, experiencing a burn in his chest, and the rest is history. Went up to the hospital, 911, called 911, and there is Dr. Coleman with his staff doing whatever they can to save Jim, and looks very good to me. Okay, Jerry, so what happens? What are the most common signs of a heart attack, and what should you do if you're experiencing one?
So pretty much if you think about where your diaphragm is, if you're having any discomfort whatsoever, so chest pressure, chest pain, jaw pain, neck pain, throat pain, shoulder, elbow, and achiness, be wary of that. Another symptom that could be associated with is just an onset of extreme nausea. You feel like you're going to vomit out of nowhere. Profuse sweating is always kind of a concerning symptom. And when I mean sweating, not just a little bit, it's almost like you walked out of a sauna, like you're drenched. Like you'd almost have to take your shirt off and it's sticking to your body. Shortness of breath, where you may have what we call conversational dyspnea, where you can't talk in full sentences. You have to catch your breath. Feeling like you walk around and you get dizzy, you feel like you're gonna pass out. You have any of these symptoms, don't delay, don't ignore them. Call 911, and the reason why you want to do that is because if something happens from where you are to when you get to the hospital, you could go unconscious, you might not be breathing, you might not get oxygen to your brain, you might be in an abnormal heart rhythm that if it's not going to be addressed immediately, it could be fatal. Now the EMS providers in this area are very highly trained to identify what they need to do.
And so what would you have to say about the EMS drivers or people in all the different areas, not only Hazleton, but, you know, maybe Drums, Cunningham, McAdoo, Freeland, you know, the different areas that they have?
Well, we're very fortunate in this area that the vast majority, probably about 95% of the EMS units are affiliated with our division of EMS at Lehigh Valley Health Network.
Okay.
So all of their medical directors are on staff in our department.
Yeah.
And with that, we have annual, biannual training. And a lot of the times, we always have a couple scenarios related to cardiac care, because it's a pretty common complaint. And part of my fellowship, when I did in 2007 and 2008, was to train the paramedics to interpret the EKG with a heart rhythm to see if someone's having a heart attack or not. So the training goes back almost close to 10 years. So they're very well versed in all those symptoms I was telling you about.
Yeah. Someone's experiencing some different comfort, but they're, you know, they have some of these, but they say, you know, honey, drive me up to the hospital. I think there's something wrong, okay? Because, you know, by the time they get here from 911, you just jump in a car and drive up there and, you know, take me up there and, you know, call my son, call my daughter, let them know I'm upset. So that's sort of like a typical man situation.
Right, because you feel like you're going towards your designation you need to be.
Yeah.
The problem is, if something happens on the side of the road, they have to get your location. Your loved one may not exactly know where they are exactly, so then they can't get a GPS coordinate on you, so they have to find you.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, you're just adding to a delay of diagnosis. And the big thing is time is muscle. The longer you're having blockages, a lack of blood flow to the heart, the more damage will occur. And the longer that happens, it could potentially be permanent damage that's irreversible.
So 911
is
that's it. Just
paramount.
go to 911. That's what your wife did for you, right, Jim? Okay, so now there's certain, you know, we talk about our hospital, okay, and how great it is, really. There's a timeline, okay, there's a national timeline when someone hits the emergency door until something is going on. What was the timeline with Jim Bognett?
Well, when Mr. Bognett arrived in the emergency department to when he had his disease vessel opened up, it was 106 minutes. Now, the national standard is 120 minutes for transfers into a cardiac cath center. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but remember, he had to be stabilized for an extensive period of time. At least 25 minutes of that 106 minutes was resuscitating him and doing a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time, and also trying to arrange for an aircraft to take him down there and account for the flight, the transfer from the aircraft to the cath center. So we routinely are able to do times that are equal to larger institutions that have a cath center and a team in-house. And that's
better. Yeah.
That's a big kudos to the hospital
So,
and the administration of helping us out.
So his heart, okay, we have a picture we're going to put up of a heart.
Sure.
Okay, what are we looking at here?
You're looking at the right side of the picture. There's going to be a diseased vessel. It's the right coronary artery. And explain it, since you do construction, I like to kind of break it down to explain to someone so everyone understands it. You ever remove a diseased pipe and it has to be replaced. There's a lot of stuff in it, a lot of gook. Yeah. So you basically, all that flow is almost down to nothing. Right. And anything over 75% of lack of flow, they'll put a stent in. A stent's basically opening up that pipe. And then the next picture is after the cardiac cath is performed, and they either go through the wrist or the groin. They go up and they get into your vessel and they shoot dye to see if there's these blockages. And they open it up and they take a picture after the fact. And hopefully it's like having a new piece of plumbing in your heart, but not replacing it, you're just having it opened up.
What did Jim need?
What was that?
What did Jim need?
He needed a stent in his right side of his heart.
Okay.
And he got that. And what's amazing was, I remember I ran into his wife at a family function afterwards. By the time she got down there, he was already in recovery. Everything was done. And she's like, what do you mean everything's done? We're like, he's gonna be okay. And she's like, I just got here. So it's the system is really well tuned to move quickly when it needs to.
So Jim, your wife was, now if you were there by yourself, okay.
If I was there by myself, I'd be in the cemetery today.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, right?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
because I would have never called 911. I just, again, thought I just was
go
getting
away.
sick, yeah.
You remind me of a person who passed away many years ago, my father. Okay, he died of a massive heart attack. And the Sunday night before that, he was experiencing, my mother's begging him, look, this is going back in '86. I don't know what the case would have been, Jerry, but the point is, I think if he would have gone that night, but typical Italian, hard head, don't worry, Rose, I'm going to be okay, give me an aspirin or whatever. And the next morning, he had the heart attack and died.
Interesting point. My wife did give me 2 aspirin.
Yeah. Is that a good thing to do?
Absolutely.
As soon as it starts.
As soon as you start, so you take an aspirin.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Two of
So,
them.
we got a couple of minutes. So, Jerry, what are some of the things that keep a healthy heart? What do you do?
Stay fit. Try to eat the best you can. Try to reduce your stress level. That's probably the hardest for everyone because it's a stressful society, it's stressful jobs, stressful life. But if you can kind of find that balance of keeping your weight down, not getting diabetes. If you have diabetes, a problem with your sugar, it can be controlled with diet and exercise. Get your cholesterol profile from your provider and see where your cholesterol is. And really you want to eat that Mediterranean diet where there's lots of fruits, vegetables, grains, olive oils, alcohol in moderation.
I mean, you go do all of that good
I'm
stuff.
not sure about the stress. But that's
Yeah.
probably-
Well, forget it. You're in business 48 years.
Yeah.
Forget about it. You got the stress. Okay. Here again, it's so important for people to go at least once a year to get a good physical. Right. And that's the key thing. I think those were some telltale signs could pop up. If they see blood work or something. Not that they're life or death, but the point is they can address them. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah.
The other thing was about, you were saying about heart attacks. The big thing is emphasizing about the difference between men and women. There's research saying that if you're an elderly woman and you have a heart attack, your mortality is much higher than a man's. And what they found was women are much less likely to seek help than men. And what's
You're kidding me?
No. And what's concerning about it is typically in that generation, they're caregivers, they're the patriarch of the family, they want to do everything for the family, because the family is their world.
That's it. Yeah.
But they put everything on the back burner for themselves, time for themselves, stress reduction, getting enough sleep. And that can prove a pretty disastrous scenario if you ignore those symptoms. So if you have any of those symptoms, male or female, don't ignore them, call 911.
I'm hoping, Jerry, as a result of this show, and that's why I tell people to download our app, because here you could anyone could watch this and say, look, here Jerry, Dr. Coleman, Jim Bogue that was on the Sam Lesante, here's what they had to say about a heart attack and what happens. I'm hoping we could save a couple lives by this. Folks, it's 911, Lehigh Valley Hospital Network. I mean, here again, second and right up the street. I mean, it's minutes away. Jerry, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Okay,
it's my pleasure. And Jim, nice talking with you, okay? Tell your brother Joe I was asking you about him. See the good teacher that I was? He became a doctor, Jim. You know that? And kudos to your wife too. She should get a medal.
I have to thank the whole crew.
Yeah,
Jim,
yeah.
Dr. Snyder, they're all just great.
Great
the
people.
whole staff at the ER is just out of this world.
And sometimes they don't get the thanks that they
Right.
deserve, you know that, because you just,
Right.
sometimes it's a thankless job. I can never do what you do, Jerry, I'm telling you right now. Dr. Coleman, folks, up in the emergency department, he's your assistant director, right? Correct. And Jim Bognet, who is the owner of Bognet Inc., a construction contracting firm here for 48 years in Hazleton. We hope you learned something on the Sam Lesante Show today. We'll see you next time.